celebrated. And we're hoping to change in that. But the nice thing about Night to Shine is it's not just a prom, it's not just a party, it's a network of like-minded churches. I mean, an example of that is some work that we've done in Ukraine lately. Without our Night to Shine churches, so many people who were literally stuck in several story buildings, or I mean, I could go on, because of our Night to Shine churches and the disability directors and the planners, they were able to come together, and so many people were able to get to the border and rescued from their situation. So it really is more than just a party. So here comes Shine On. We had, over the years, we had a pastor, one specific pastor, and some family members say, one night is just not enough. We love this message of celebration. We love hearing that we have such value and that the Lord has a plan for our lives, but we need more. And you all know that better than anybody. So we started Shine On and gathered some world-class organizations that do several parts of ministry really, really well, and began sharing those with the people that reached out to us. When I came on board, I had a little bit of technology in my background. I said, oh my gosh, and I was a disability ministry director. I thought, I wish I knew about these. I didn't know about 80% or more of these resources, free for the most part, resources, and these incredible people. Gosh, if I just would have known about this. So we created a pretty simple platform to where they're accessible. There are over 300 resources, Shine On app and website. So this video is the story of a ministry that started with one of the Shine On contributors, Young Life Capernaum. A relationship with that amazing ministry really sparked this ministry called Shine Tallahassee. They were an integral part of Night to Shine and really getting Night to Shine going. So it's just kind of, it's telling the story of Night to Shine, something like celebrating these incredible people that have so much to bring to society, celebrating them, and then carrying on life, sharing life and community with these families. I mean, they're incredible. So I'll stop talking and let's watch the video. That's okay.
Hello, I'm Scott Hunter. I'm the lead pastor of Genesis Church.
And I'm Rachel Ritter, Kids and Special Needs Pastor at Genesis Church. And we are the co-founders of Shine Tallahassee Incorporated, and this is our story.
Our church has been serving the special needs community of Tallahassee, Florida for over a decade. It was first on our hearts to reach children through a Sunday morning special needs ministry. Once word spread that we were welcoming those with special needs, the Young Life Capernaum group in our area reached out to see if they could use our special needs facility to hold their gatherings. So I gave them a key and said, of course.
Shortly after, we then began an interactive church experience at a local residential group home for adults with special needs on Sunday afternoons so that they could have their very own church.
Then in 2015, Tim Tebow announced that he was going to partner with churches around the country to hold a prom for individuals with special needs. We were fortunate enough to be a part of Night to Shine that very first year.
And connecting with guests and families that we had met from Capernaum and Night to Shine, and then we learned that a large group of friends were getting ready to graduate out of their program. And these parents knew that it might be difficult for their kids to leave behind something that had meant so much to them.
So that is where Shine Tallahassee was born. We were presented with a need, and we knew we had to meet that need. It was our dream that our friends with special needs would be given the opportunities to shine in our community throughout the entire year.
We kicked things off with Friday Night Shine, a monthly social event program where our friends can come together, see one another, fellowship, have fun, eat snacks, play crazy games, learn about Jesus, and just feel celebrated. Over the years, we have done everything from Disney night to medieval times, Santa Breakfast, Galaxy night, you name it, we've probably done it. Friday Night Shine has become a community favorite.
Then, in the middle of COVID, we were presented with another need. Families were without programs for their adult children to attend during the day while they were at work.
So, in the middle of COVID, we launched Rise and Shine, our full-time Monday through Friday day program for adults with special needs. And now, our Sunday morning special needs ministry at Genesis Church has transformed into an amazing program that serves individuals of all ages across all areas of our church. We never could have imagined what God had in store for us.
And we are so thankful for the Tim Tebow Foundation and Night to Shine and the incredible individuals we've gotten to know and do life with because of this awesome journey. It's at our first Night to Shine inside of Genesis Church. Our last prom had over 3,000 in attendance at the North Florida Fairgrounds. Our God is so good.
Wonderful, isn't it? So we have our Shine On panelists here, and we're going to have a discussion that kind of brings everything together today and covers some issues perhaps we haven't even discussed yet. So let's start with Ryan Falk from Joni and Friends. Where's Ryan? So make sure he has a microphone. There it is, right there.
Hello.
Okay, so Ryan, what does it look like for the disability ministry movement to be a success, and what's standing in the way of that success?
Yeah, I think a lot of times disability ministry is often emphasized as disability ministry, but it's really disability ministry. And so what a success actually looks like is that ministry is being done, that people are hearing the gospel, that they're being discipled in a church context, growing in their knowledge and love of God, and being able to use their gift for the mission of the church to fulfill the Great Commission. So if we're doing that, we're winning. Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of ways to get there, and it's a multi-pronged thing. It's a much larger answer, but I think that's the metric of success. And so we can ask ourselves, how much are people being discipled? And that becomes the measuring stick for whether or not we're succeeding and progressing.
So what are the obstacles to achieving that success?
It depends on the church. Obviously, there's the physical and social barriers. Some people, if you can't get into a church, you're not going to be able to be a part of the church, even if they're a welcoming group inside. But if you can get into the church and you find people who aren't welcoming or who aren't paying attention, that becomes a barrier as well. But I think probably by and large, the largest barrier that exists is just people not knowing what they don't know and not thinking about it. And so it's, I think, on us to break that cycle of inattentiveness and bring it to people's forefront in terms of evangelism, discipleship, mission, which are things that churches obviously care deeply about. But if we can integrate it into those things, then it becomes essential to a church and not an optional program that they may or may not choose.
Wonderful. Does anyone have something to add on that in terms of what does success look like for the movement, or any obstacles in its way? Or is that the best answer? Okay, here we go.
I just think, to reiterate what Ryan was saying, that it's just about doing ministry. Or as Dr. Hardwick says, we build our churches backwards right now. And then we think about, oh, people with disabilities should probably be participating here as well. Instead, what if we thought about ministry involving people with varied abilities from the beginning and said, this is just how ministry works? Instead of having to intentionally build a disability ministry, this is just how ministry works, and everyone is expected to be involved. And we know that that means we have to build in supports for some people to be able to be a part of that ministry.
Anyone else?
Well, and it's also not just silo ministry, and it's not just ministry too. So I think success is when we're seeing people with disabilities involved in the entire life of the church, leadership on down.
Yeah, and you know, that kind of leads to one of the things I learned being a part of this conference for a number of years. It's not just that we need to welcome people with disabilities. It's that we need to somehow teach church communities that they're incomplete without people with disabilities. So how do we make that the normative theological / sociological perspective?
We need more people in ministry who are leaders, who have disabilities, who are our role models. We need to be highlighting those stories, and we all need to be attentive listeners to those stories and learning what are their barriers to leading ministry, and how can we as the church globally change what we think of as church so that we have more leaders with disabilities who are active in ministry.
I mean, it is such a shift in thinking. So many of these families, I speak from experience, they've been wounded so many times by the church and by their neighbors and at school, and they've heard all the things that their child or they cannot do. So then to be invited to church, they have to be really brave and bold. And so it's saying, we need you. Your gifts are so needed. It's really a flip. I mean, we're not saving that. We're, like you said, we're incomplete without. I mean, we're missing out on ministry, so much ministry, by not having these families coming.
If I bounce off that, oh, sorry. I was going to say, like, people do internalize that own helplessness, where sometimes the barrier exists inside people where they say, I could never do that. And it becomes the church's responsibility to say, yes, you can, because it's God who's working in you and through you.
I was going to say, I said this yesterday, I believe, but the hearts of leaders need to change as well. And that we can't continue to preach that we're reaching all if all has a stipulation behind it. And if we continue to make it a side ministry, continue, more people are not going to go to the church. They're not going to trust the church. They're not going to trust us as leaders, because all they see are other leaders who don't want them there.
Well, and then speaking of that leadership, it was so simple, but last night we had a worship service where we're able to say, it's okay if you're making noise. How many churches is that like frowned upon and scowled at? So how do we help church leaders cultivate an environment where it's okay for someone to make noise during the message, during prayer, whatever it is? Really easy question, right?
I think you have to begin with the heart of the leader. The gospel is the theology of weakness and welcome. And as leaders, you want to have it all together. You want to have a good show. You want to preach a good message. You want it all to be dialed in. And, the gospel is messy, and it's for the broken. And so I think once a leader, or as a leader, begins to see the gospel and see their own brokenness and see that we're all broken, and it's not about having a well-oiled machine, but it's about just having an honest place where people can come and be broken and be welcome. That's where it begins. It's got to be seen as we're a family of broken people who have a wonderful Savior, that suffering is redemptive, that it's okay, that the mess is okay.
It's not performance based. I mean, these kids and these adults, I mean, it's all week long therapy, performance. How'd they do? Did they do okay? Or did they improve here? That's not how worship, that's not how church, not how community should be.
I think also there's the leader needs to model behavior that if the leader's okay with the noises being, then hopefully that will be a ripple effect through the group. And I remember in a Young Life Club for kids without disabilities, we had a guy come with a disability, and at the end we sang Brown Eyed Girl, and he shouted out, "Brad, did you write that song?" And all the kids gasped and looked like, how am I going to react? And I said, no, but thank you for thinking that I could. And and everyone else was like, oh, if Brad's okay with him being here, I'm okay with him being here. So I think when we can train church leaders from up front to model the fact that it's okay for people to make noise or express differently, or that maybe even announce that, if you're not okay with that noise being made, and you can go there because they should stay here. So
yeah,
I think we have to get back to the heart of ministry and what the church is specifically. And Jesus modeled that really well for us when the children came running up to him, and all the Pharisees and the people around him like, no, get it back away. And Jesus said, no, let them come. In the same heart as us, Jesus doesn't want the church to become a business or a system. He wants it to be a place where all can come and be who they are, just the way they are, as he created them. And if we can get back to the heart of the church, man, ministry will explode just the way Jesus envisioned it to happen.
I think we need to move those with special needs out of the crowd and onto the platform. And I think when we start showing our families on stage, we start hearing testimonies from different ones on stage, that really changes the crowd's perception. Because many times, the hard thing is now just getting them in the crowd, right? But that's where I think I've seen such a big change, is when we got our families up front. We got those with different needs sharing, speaking, sharing their testimony, singing, wherever their gift and talent is. So when people can see that, I think we underestimate them all the time. We underestimate God all the time. So obviously we're gonna underestimate those that we feel like are deficient, when they're not. So If we can see more people up front, that would be amazing.
I think also too, it takes more than one disability ministry Sunday a year. I think a lot of churches feel like they've arrived and it's a victory when you have one Sunday a year where you kind of celebrate the fact that you have this ministry and you do some awareness and education. But let's be honest, most people come to church once a month. So they're probably going to miss that Sunday. So it's going to take beyond just the leadership buy-in. It's going to take continual communication from the stage. You know, having people on stage, awesome. Having a leader on the stage communicate it, awesome. A couple things that to me are victories, to others may not seem like victory. At our church, like right in the front row, right in front of the preacher, where most of our folks sit. Sometimes we got a guy that lays down in the front row and sleeps. Like people wouldn't think that is a victory, but he's welcome. And his ministry need is rest. And he finds it a place of comfort to sleep in the front row. We had another situation where a preacher gets emotional on stage. Somebody gets out of the stand. She walks up and hugs him while he's preaching. And that's allowed. And that's not poo-pooed. So because if you make it a part of who you are, and it's more than just once Sunday a year, your congregation will buy in after your leader is bought in.
And you know, where I want to go next, actually, I think fits well with, I think what I can say is my favorite aspect of this year's conference, and it's that we have sign language interpretation happening at the event, which in and of itself is a demonstration of being welcoming of people with disabilities. And it reminds me, as I was sitting watching the interpretation, how we're in a cultural moment where our culture is looking at people with disabilities in a new way. After the best picture for the Oscars was Coda, and the best actor was a deaf actor. And so I would love to hear from Brandon of the Deaf Millennial Project about what churches can do in this cultural moment to embrace the deaf community.
Just a side note, I didn't like the movie Coda.
You didn't like it? Okay, so
But you're right. The historical.
why didn't you like it? I want to know that. I'm curious.
That's another conversation for another day. But the historical moment, you're right. It's a historical. The second deaf person to win an Oscar, and that's a big historical moment. And I think often church think, oh, because they're not showing up, we don't need to provide it. Oh, okay. If the pastor doesn't show up, then I don't need to go either. I mean,
well, you know, one of the most powerful scenes in that movie, forgive me for jumping in, but was when the deaf parents went to a school event, and the director changes the perspective to the parents, and they could hear nothing, and there was no interpretation, and they weren't able to participate in the event. So I wonder how many deaf Americans are sitting in churches wondering what's the point.
Every Sunday, a deaf person shows up to church, and the first thing they're going to look for is an interpreter. And if the interpreter's not there, they're going to sit there, missing out the whole gospel moment. So there has to be a time where, or a decision that has to be made that, hey, we don't know if the person in the audience has hearing loss, is deaf, or not. But are we committed to reaching all and providing an interpreter every Sunday, even if it's just one? Showing up. And that makes a huge difference because the deaf community is so small. That one deaf person can go and tell the other deaf friends, like, hey, my church is providing an interpreter. They're being accessible, and that's what we want. But think about it. 7 million deaf people live in America, and less than 1%, 2% actually go to church. And it's just based solely if they see an interpreter or not. So for churches, they have to make a decision like, okay, if you're going to reach all, that must include deaf people as well.
If someone's watching this, I'm sure they're saying, I agree. And then they go, how do I find an interpreter? You Google it. I mean, how do churches find quality interpreters so that folks feel welcomed?
Yeah, that's the hard part, to be honest. Because one of the things I suggested in my workshop yesterday, you need to look for a certified qualified interpreter, but it's also good to look for a Christian interpreter as well, because of the context that's happening within the church world. The first is obviously, yes, Googling, searching for interpreting agencies in the area and contacting and asking questions, asking the right questions, but also asking stupid questions because most churches don't know. They're like, how did this work? How do we request an interpreter? Can this interpreter, will it be the same interpreter every week? One thing that we're going to be providing on our website soon over the next 2 or 3 months is an interpreting network system where you're going to be able to find like interpreting agency like that provided here, Christian interpreter, to be able to provide churches that access of a starting place of where and how, and walk alongside with them. But also asking your deaf people within your church if you have it. Like, hey, do you know any interpreters? Can we connect with them? Do you mind providing our information or giving us their information so we connect and chat with them? More than often you find they're willing to walk with you. They're willing to teach you. They're willing to educate you if only you ask and empower them to.
One more follow-up for you. What does it look like to not just have the deaf community welcome in church, but an active participant in worship?
That's the inclusivity part. And that's just as equally important because for me, I grew up in a church where, like my mom's church, all hearing, no deaf person, only deaf person, no interpreter, no, just missing out on the worship part. And then going to high school, going to a deaf church, and seeing sign language and seeing deaf people lead worship and getting asked to be involved into worship, that makes a huge difference. More often you find that not just deaf people, but any person, like just we mentioned, with disability, they want to be involved. They want to be involved in either playing the guitar, drum, singing, uh, interpreting the music. They want to be involved. They want to feel just like everyone else and serve. And that's just simply asking, like, hey, do you want to be involved in the church? What area do you see yourself serving in? And not just the deaf ministry, but the worship, leadership team, equipping them, giving them the opportunities to serve.
Yes, and if I can encourage you, his website, the resources are phenomenal, so world class. Deaf Millennial Project. If you're new to deaf culture, you're not alone, but let's change that. Please check it out. I mean, deafmillennialproject.org.
The next question is for Brad from Young Life, Capernaum. How did you connect with and cooperate with Night to Shine so that others can perhaps bring that to their own communities?
Yeah, so one of the things that we found as we looked to start Young Life Ministries around the country, just any Young Life ministry, we come into a community and we want to build bridges. And one of the things that I learned in looking at Night to Shine, as many of our Capernaum clubs were participating, was that Night to Shine had this inclusivity in the community. And I did the research. It may be different now, Ellen, but it was 312 volunteers at the average Night to Shine. And so if we're moving into a community to say we want to start a Capernaum ministry, that seemed like a pretty interesting place to start collaborating. And we especially need a connection to a church because we're an adolescent ministry. And so at 21, 22, we need to find space. So the fact that Night to Shine had stood in the space that we were also hoping to occupy, it was a natural place for us to link arms. And we also know too that Young Life may or may not have a great reputation with some local churches, but Tim Tebow, everyone loves him, except for Steeler fans. And so, it just was a natural place for us to start having that conversation and start building bridges to the churches that we're hosting. And for a lot of our Capernaum leaders already, they were very invested in Night to Shine because it was a great opportunity to celebrate and have fun. And I think what we found was, as we started researching how many of our clubs are involved in Night to Shine, it was overwhelming. The number of our ministries that were already plugged in. I'm in the Eastern Division, the Northeast U.S., and so many of them, but around the country, so many of our ministries were really invested. So it was a perfect union for us to kind of link arms and collaborate. And hopefully we're helping the church run Night to Shine better. We have an army of volunteers in Young Life that can come and help and be buddies and do setup and tear down. A number of my friends DJ at Night to Shine themselves. One of my best friends is from West Virginia, and he sent me a picture of himself with his tuxedo t-shirt on while he was DJing the Night to Shine event in Morgantown. And so we can provide some of those things, as well as it was a great opportunity for us also to celebrate our friends and receive, as a number of the folks in the community started saying, yes, we need to do this year round. There are 364 other days, and how do we continue to invest in the lives of some of these folks? And so that was where we jumped in.
Great. Next question, we'll start off with Severin Hamilton of Guidelight. So how do we train up the next generation of Christian leaders in disability ministry?
Yeah, I think we need to obviously start with the leadership that we have currently. I think Guidelight, we do family retreats and disability training. And one thing that we found is when we do these family retreats, we get a lot of volunteers that come. We partner with local churches. And when those volunteers come, a lot of them come with no exposure. So I think, our habits shape our affections. So before we had our youngest son, Coulter, with Down syndrome, I didn't really know a lot about Down syndrome. But then once you're exposed to that world and that life, it changes you. And so I think the next generation, just getting them in front of and in life with people that have disabilities is huge. So whatever platform that might be, whether it's a family retreat or whether it's a Night to Shine or Nathaniel's Hope, a big event, but getting young people volunteering, helping them see people with disabilities that, there's always that fear factor, when you first encounter somebody with a disability, it's out of your norm. And, but then we had this retreat in Toronto, Canada, just before the pandemic. And this was one brother, it was his first time being with anybody with disability. And he had a buddy that he was a buddy to a young man with autism and is nonverbal. And I mean, it was magical. It was obviously the grace of God. But that whole weekend, he went from kind of deer in the headlights to, wow, I love being this young man's buddy. And I think it changed him. So I think just providing opportunities for young people to volunteer, to get involved, and begin to just rub shoulders. I'm also passionate about Christian education. I think I'd love to see Christian schools really champion. All Belong is just rocking it, and I would love to see that spread across the U.S. because if Christian schools would welcome and embrace people with disabilities, and kids start going to school with kids with disabilities rather than just with typical or able kids, it'll begin to just change them just by process of their habits. They're just used to seeing folks with different abilities. So yeah, I think just putting kids in context where they rub shoulders with people with disabilities, and just let those life on life habits just begin to shape their affections, where they can't imagine life without these kids with special needs.
Can I tag team with that? I could not agree more. I think at 99 Billions, kind of our theory of change is that once you get to know someone, you start to care about someone. And once you start to care about someone, that's when change happens. And so we're all here most likely because we know someone and they've changed our lives. And we know that, and just the beauty and mutuality of friendship and relationships with people that are a bit different, not too much different. But I think that's where it happens. Like, we have to get to know people, and our families have to be willing to take the risk, like Ellen said, to come to church, which is where it lies on us. But I do think it's just simply, we just have to start building relationships So I think all of us in some form or fashion, and I'm sure most of you too, have avenues for that. And just encourage you to keep checking those out, because we definitely don't need to recreate the wheel, but we've got to provide places for people to meet.
Yeah, so for training the next generation, I think people will often back away because they're intimidated by the professionalism of how they see disability interacted with in like special education or in medical terms. There are so many acronyms and Latin terms and things that make it intimidating and inaccessible, and helping people, especially the younger generation, understand you do not need to be an expert on disability to become an expert on an individual and to be their friend. And once you develop that relationship, like has been said, that's what starts to get people to actually lean in and engage, rather than say, oh, I don't know what all those things mean, but you can know a person.
And I think that takes being teachable. And I'm so encouraged when I get to work with pastors who say, I have so much to learn from the disability community. I have so much to learn about what we could do differently, and being willing to say our church needs to change because this person is a part of our community, or because they're not a part of our community. Maybe we need to learn to just turn the sound down so that you don't have to go to the cry room, or that it's not going to cause you to make those noises and run up and down the hall because we've just turned the sound down in general. So what was triggering that behavior has now disappeared. So I am just so encouraged, and I think if we can model that as leaders, then that's going to speak volumes to who the church who will be, right? Who is actually the church now in the young people. That's going to speak volumes to them to say this is where the church is going.
I think sometimes in the church world, we work so hard to program something, and we fall into the trap of come and see, and we recruit volunteers to be part of our program because they need to provide some type of service. And I think we've got it backwards. So if we want to empower the next generation, if we went back to what Jesus said, instead of come and see, go and be. So what if we had the next generation, or whatever generation, that just wants to go and be? What if we did reverse inclusion and we sent people into the community to be coaches and Special Olympics, or to be just a friend where people are already at? I think if we reversed our entire ministry model and we sent people out just to be friends, coaches, peers, I think that would make a tremendous difference.
I'm confident there's someone watching or listening that says to themselves, okay, you've convinced me. We need disability ministry in my church. And let's start with Ellen on this. Okay, step one. What is step one to beginning reaching out to and ministering to people in our congregations with disabilities?
I mean, I think it's already been said, but you do not have to be an expert to be a friend. And just speaking from my family and my situation, I just reach out, just making it so that your church is welcome, but having that heart to pursue, just as Jesus did, went out into the community, went out and accepted. I mean, just my story, I shared a little bit last night, but church is so important. We know this, we're all Christians, but we don't know what the future holds, and we need to have a community of believers around us. We need to be able to support others, and then we'll need support one day. My ministry that I started years ago started with just 2 families. It grew to a church on campus, equine therapy. I mean, just because moms and dads came into relationship, shared life, found healing, and began to really explore the gifts that God had given them. They were brought out of that isolation. They were able to release that loneliness and really enjoy life with others. And so that was when my guy was kind of littler, and little did I know that later things would take a sharp turn and we would land in crisis. My family was in crisis, and the very family of the 2, one of them, she started a group home right on the same street as our church. And I could have never predicted my greatest fear would be that my son would need way more support than what we could give him to just be able to leave the home or function at all. And who was it that was able to come in and intervene and welcome him into a group home, very family that I was doing years and years before? I couldn't have written that. That was God. And that ministry was not Ellen or my husband. That was God. That was because I went to McLean Church when I lived in the DC area, and I was ministered to by that ministry. So it's so important that we fight for community. It's so important, even for us introverts, or even if we're shy, that we push through and find the right fit for us so that we can have deep level relationships with people of Christian character to support us. So just start anywhere, literally start anywhere.
So I'll tell you how the ministry at my church started. I saw a family out in the lobby wheeling their child around in a wheelchair, and I was like, "Hey, how come you're not in church? What's going on?" And she said, "Well, I don't have anybody to watch my kid." And I was like, "I can watch your kid. Like I'm I'll watch your son." And it turned to be Becky Davidson, like the founder of Rising Above, and she had been at our church for years and didn't have anyone to hang out with her son. Her husband was an elder at our church, and I just, if you're asking what's the first step, I mean, assess who you have in your body. Like, what are the needs currently? And then ask yourself, how can I fulfill those needs? Like, that's all she needed was someone to to chat with her son and walk around with him in the lobby. And now we have 20-30 families, because if you serve one, it's like you were mentioning, they're going to tell their friends, and they're going to say, "Hey, I have there's an opportunity for community here because this is available." And so I just assessed what my first need was. And my first need was, I have one child who I could hang out with for an hour and a half. And that's all I did.
What that sounds like to me is deep listening.
I was going to say, I think we can all agree, be obedient to the Holy Spirit and what God is asking you to do. And for me, it was finding 3 or 4 friends who could come alongside with me and pray. I mean, anytime you're thinking about starting a ministry, that is not an easy decision. And it's a hard decision, because what you're doing is committing to something greater than yourself that's going to require a lot of sacrifice. And so finding 3 or 4 friends who can come alongside with you and pray and consider joining with you and having that team or community is so important. You don't want to do ministry alone. You don't want to, because that's the fastest burnout for all. And that actually end up hurting the people that you're trying to serve. And so finding community and finding a group of people to pray and start and do it, that would be my first suggestion.
And I think, going back to kind of what you were saying, it jogged my memory of similar at my church, just with a family that had a son that was just in a wheelchair sitting next to them in worship, which was great and totally fine. But I just was like, hey, let's bring, John David into class with the other kids. And they're like, no, he's fine. We don't want to do that. And I was like, here's the deal. You might not, and he might not, but those 4-year-olds in that class are missing out on knowing your son, and we need your son to be there. And so will you trust us and be brave and be willing to risk that, because that's how the generation changes. He needs to be in that class so that those 4-year-olds learn what he is like and that he is their friend. And so I just think, even parents being when your church takes that big first step, be willing to trust them, even if they mess up or say the wrong thing, just because your child's important and valued and needed. I think I look at parents and say that, and they often look at me and say, really? You're really, really genuinely wanting my child here? And we're like, absolutely. So I don't know. That story jogged my memory a lot of just no, we need those 4-year-olds.
Absolutely. We're just chatting, Brad and I. Our friends with disabilities are often our most powerful evangelists. John Alex has brought more people to the Lord than I probably ever will. And so including them and making a place for them and like having them as a part of us is evangelism. Like that's changing the world. Like that's the gospel. And so I think that's beautiful. What you just said is like, it's not, I want John Alex to, like my kids are impacted by him. And so I want my family to be involved in this because it's changing my kids' lives, you know. So.
Yeah, I don't need you to pray for healing for my ears. I need you to be an ally. I need you to walk alongside me. Like, and I think that what many people want to do. Oh, no, come and pray for healing for your disability. Like, no, I don't want that. I want you to be an ally. I want you to go alongside with me and read people who are just like me and just want access to the gospel and to be involved and be equipped and do the same thing that you're doing up here and reach more people. Yeah.
We're almost out of time, but I want to ask Beth to get us in the final issue is how do we capitalize on the momentum that we're building here at Inclusion Fusion moving forward?
Yeah, so there's been incredible content here this weekend. I mean, a day and a half in my mind is blown by just all the information. But to me, what has made these 2 days so special is just the networking and the relationships that have been renewed and support and push each other so that we can grow the disability ministry movement. So whatever that looks like, know that Key Ministry would love to be part of that. We host a monthly roundtable, and many of you in this room have been on that each. The next one is coming Monday, May 2nd at noon Eastern time. And anybody that's in this room or that's watching can join. Just go to keyministry.org to register. But I think it's really, really important that we don't just let this be a great day and a half and then that's it. We need to continue to support each other, encourage each other, and push each other to move forward.
I'm going to invite Catherine from Key Ministry to come up, and while she comes up, let's thank our panelists for their participation today. You all can stay seated if you want. Or what do you prefer? You want them to be seated or stay up here? Or why don't you guys stay here for just a minute? I'll stand with you.
All right, I would like everybody to take out their program, if you don't mind. And we're all going to open to pages 30 and 31. So we are really serious about you guys taking what you have absorbed here, which is a lot. We know that probably you're feeling kind of overloaded right now. I know I am. But we want you to just take some time. It can be right now. It can be in a few minutes, however you want to do it. It can be, this afternoon, but we want you to do this today before time gets away. To look at these questions that we have here and to really honestly answer them for yourself. Just simple questions. Number one, based on what you learned and the connections you made, where do you believe God is leading you? God does not have any of us here this, yesterday and today by accident. It's all very deliberate in his plan. He has you to be an influence on someone else's life, whether it's to create ministry, continue ministry, grow ministry. Please just give that some prayerful thought. Number two, what's your immediate next step? All of this is great head knowledge. It's great encouragement in your walk with Jesus, but it doesn't do any good if it just stays inside of you. It needs to be shared. We serve a Savior who came to minister, as Brandon has said so eloquently, to all. We need to do something with what we've learned. Number three, and this is really important, who can you connect with that's going to help you stay accountable? Maybe you have a prayer partner. Maybe you have, somebody that you meet with on a regular basis already. Tell them about what God has impressed on you this weekend and ask them to pray with you. And then, the next time you get together with them for coffee or prayer, ask them to follow up with you and just to make sure that you're going to do something, what God is leading you to do with what he has laid on your heart this weekend. And then number four, we'd like for you to just list 3 new people or organizations that you've connected with the last day and a half who you can continue building a relationship with, maybe to see how the ministry you are already doing can grow, or will give you fresh vision for something God has laid on your heart this weekend. And if you haven't met 3 people or organizations that you'd like to connect with, well, we have a little time after we wrap up in a couple minutes. So we just really encourage you to please be serious about this. Take some time to fill these out today. And then, as Beth has said, follow up with us at keyministry.org if we can help you. I know anyone from any of these organizations would be happy to help with your specific need as well.
How about I pray us out then? Let's pray together. Dear Lord, thank you for all you've done at Inclusion Fusion Live 2022. Thank you for this group of people who've all come together to encourage others to truly love all of those in our community of believers and make all welcome, and to empower our churches to see the need for people with disabilities in our congregations. I ask that you would make those connections that Catherine was just talking about. You'd bring about fresh connections from this event, bring about even more powerful ministry in the days ahead, and that you would guide us all in our journeys home, wherever we're headed, and bring us back together again next year. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you.